Hi, Justin. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Great to see you again.
Good. You as well. You as well. Hope you guys are doing okay up there. You're in Washington, right?
We are, yeah. I'm in Gig Harbor, Washington right now, and yeah, so far so good. It's been an interesting few months, but I think everybody's been living in interesting times.
Yeah, definitely has been an interesting few months. Let's jump right in and talk about what's on everybody's mind. Hand sanitizer.
Sure.
I understand you guys are producing quite a bit of it. So how did that come about? How did that get started for you guys?
Yeah, so I go back to January 21st when the first COVID case was reported in the U.S. It was in here in Washington State. If you go back to that time in January, we all, I think, were seeing the news coming out of China about what was happening in December and the shutdowns, the lockdowns, disruptions. And so when that first case hit here in the U.S., it was kind of a surprise to all of us. And so on the 21st of January, I convened our production team and I said, I think we have maybe 6 or 7 weeks before there will start to be rolling shutdowns here in Washington and other parts of the country. And it'll have a dramatic impact on logistics, raw inputs. You could go into general lockdown, quarantine. So I said, I think we have 6 or 7 weeks to fill the warehouse with as much spirits as possible, get stuff ready, do extra shifts, overtime, weekends. And so 6 or 7 weeks went by. We filled the warehouse. We made about 3 or 4 months worth of kind of our rolling stock for distribution. And then we got the general quarantine order from the governor, where they shut down all bars, restaurants. The school districts were closing. Our tasting rooms, of which we operate 5 in Washington, were wrapped up in the bar and restaurant shutdown. And production facilities were all being shut down. It was chaos. And we had quite a few layoffs we had to implement then immediately. That week, we started to see quite a few small distilleries donating small batches of hand sanitizer with some of the waste materials. The FDA hadn't yet issued guidance on approvals for sanitizers to be made. They did that on March 20th. So right around that same time, I convened my team again. I said, hey, I think there's an opportunity, there's a need, we're getting requests for it. Let's put a plan together. So within 48 hours, we put a plan together. The FDA then came out with recipe approval. They later came out with registration requirements. To that point, there were no registration requirements. They expedited that. TTB issued emergency regulations to allow distilleries to get denatured ethanol in. Congress waived the taxes on the denatured alcohol as part of the CARES Act. For the last 4 years, we've been working on a project with the Chehalis Indian tribe on a new, really beautiful state-of-the-art craft distillery, and it was supposed to open in May. 35,000 square feet facility, big brewery, big distillery, restaurant, bar. It's the first legal distillery on Indian land in the history of the U.S., and it's monumental in just the historic significance. In March, I approached them and said, hey, we've got all this capacity. Let's do some repiping. So we spent about 5 weeks with them repiping, and it got to the point where, as of late April, we could do 30,000 gallons a day of finished sanitizer, and started feeding large-scale customers. So it's in retail now, Costco. It's on Amazon.com. It's Safeway, some of the Kroger outfits, plus hospital chains and other kind of bigger industrial users, plus just individual consumers. Getting access to it has been a challenge. Now, there's a lot of product in the market. There's a lot of liquid. Everybody and their brothers have been making it. And now people are trying to figure out how to get rid of it. So the prices have come down. They're going to continue to come down. Plus, you're starting to see a lot of product come in from overseas of dubious quality. Even here in the U.S., we're seeing product of suspect quality hitting the shelves. There's a bad odor to it. Maybe there's a funky consistency. Maybe they're not using all the right ingredients that they have to per the regulations. Some of them are adding extra components that they might not be allowed to. Some of them, in the haste to get as much out there to sell as possible, they grabbed whatever containers they could. The containers, in many cases, might not have been rated for high proof alcohol. In fact, I've seen some evidence recently of containers that have had very high failure rates, and it's sitting in warehouses right now or was sold to customers with visible cracks in the plastic, just an overall failure. It's fascinating to watch, and so that becomes a real fire hazard too. You've got leaking product in boxes, in pallets, in a warehouse, just as the temperature is going to start taking off. So the next couple weeks and months will be really fascinating. Right now, people are trying to get their hands on dispensers. There might be a lot of liquid, but as businesses reopen, offices, restaurants, schools, consumers want to see you've got sanitizer out there, whether it's gel or liquid, and they want to see that you have access for the customer to use. So now there's a scramble to get all sorts of dispensers of all kinds. And of course, a lot of that's coming from overseas, and everybody's facing the same challenges with that. A lot of price gouging, with some really outrageous prices being charged. Vendors know they can get away with that in some cases because the checklist from the counties or the state or the cities is telling them, if you want to open to the public, you have to have XYZ. And so as a vendor supplier, you say, oh, I know you have to have it. I know I'm the only one in town with it. So they're going to charge you X, and it's going to be 5 or 6 times what it normally should be. Pretty outrageous. Even on some of the stuff online, Amazon and others, some of the prices people are charging is very excessive, and a lot of complaints about that. So we have been trying to manage the best we can, not trying to get too much inventory because we can't predict the future. We do think there's still an ongoing opportunity if you are an efficient producer and can keep your costs in control. We think the partnership with the Chehalis tribe really is a differentiator for us. We're working on some larger kind of long-term customer options beyond just what's happening right now on small ones and twos. And most importantly, we've been able to put our folks back to work. We hired quite a few of the production folks back that we laid off, plus we added some additional production folks. We did have to lay off quite a few of our sales team, our national sales team. That was very painful, but all the bars and restaurants came to a halt nationwide. Nobody was buying product. What we're seeing in the industry right now is products that are very well known in the category, whether it's beer, wine, spirits, cider, seltzers. If you're a very well known brand, high legacy brand equity, or you're very low cost, high volume, cheap, low end stuff, those have a lot of movement behind them. Because people in situations like this don't gravitate to things that are new to them. They go to what they know, or if they're worried about their own personal economics, they go to what is cheapest. So for a brand like ours, it's in the middle in that craft space, and all the other craft players, it's very difficult to play in the middle. So we've withdrawn our marketing spend. Really the most effective way we see right now to do marketing prior to COVID was sampling, a lot of sampling events in liquor stores and bars and restaurants. That wasn't allowed with the shutdown. So this whole thing has forced us to have to really rethink how you get in front of the consumer, how you engage the consumer, and how you can keep people working. And that's really critical. We think we have an obligation on employees to try to maximize that as much as we responsibly can. And then as we reopen, which we are reopening now for cocktails and tastings, how do we do that safely for the consumer so that the consumer comes in and knows that it's safe, clean, and that they'll come back over and over again. And these are all challenges we're all trying to navigate at the same time with just kind of blindfolds.
Well, that's a lot to chew on. Yeah, that's a lot to chew on as far as what's happening and to the industry today. Let me ask you. I know you're a former attorney, so I know you're pretty well versed with what's happening on the legal side, on the regulatory side. So I know quite a few states have made some small, and some have made some very large sweeping changes as far as what they'll allow for alcohol sales.
Yeah.
What changes have been made where you're at, and what changes do you see in other states? I know California has made quite a few changes.
Yep.
I think it's going to be a hard sell to turn around in 2 years or a year from now and say, hey, no more. This was an emergency thing. Stop that. So what do you think is going to be permanent? What do you think should be permanent? What should we do?
Well, I think this will create a big shift, permanent shift. So here in Washington, the Liquor and Cannabis Board came out with emergency regulations to allow bars and restaurants to sell cocktails to go. That was never allowed before. It's not in statute. The legislature did not put that in statute. It's interesting when you talk to regulators in states, they will tell you, here's a statute and here's our rules. And of course, the rules are based on what the statutes are. Okay. And the statutes for spirits are usually very, very specific, what you can do or what you can't do in some cases. Here in Washington, the license types are beer and wine or beer and wine spirits for retail. Anybody with a beer or wine license can sell bottles of wine to go, and they can sell growlers of beer to go. In some cases, your license might be able to sell a 6-pack to go of beer. Never ever could you sell a bottle of liquor to go. Never ever could you sell a cocktail to go from a restaurant, bar, or license. And it was never in statute. And so all of a sudden, the Liquor and Cannabis Board, just out of thin air, said, we're going to allow this to happen, which I think is great because the consumer wants it. It's great for the bars and restaurants. But on that one hand, they didn't have the actual legislative specific authority or guidance to allow them to do that. I think customers expect that now. I think with the delivery apps and with the restaurants for sure are going to want to continue to have that to go. I think the distributors, if they're thinking about it properly, will want that to become a permanent offering because it's just another round of volume that they can push through their system into those accounts. So I think it's going to be very hard to put the genie back in the bottle for that. I do believe you're going to see, we're seeing right now in Virginia where the Virginia Alcohol and Beverage Control Board, because Virginia controls the liquor stores, the ABC stores, they're now authorizing delivery to the home where someone can order from their local Virginia state liquor store and have it delivered to the home. That'll open up the opportunities for the Virginia distilleries to also deliver to the home. In Oregon, we at Heritage kind of forced the issue when Oregon allowed the bars and restaurants to sell cocktails to go and to make deliveries. It wasn't specifically called for in the statutes or in the rules for distilleries to do it. And we just did it anyway. We said, your rule has not been drafted properly. It discriminates against us. We are an agent of the state in Oregon. We are going to do this. And we did it. And we got a nasty gram. And we had a meeting with them. And we said, here's the problem with the law in terms of how you've done it. And about a week and a half later, they implemented regulations. And now distilleries can do curbside delivery. They can do delivery to the home. And ultimately, we'll be able to do shipping to the home, to the consumer. We see in Kentucky already that the legislature there this year created a Kentucky opportunity for distilleries to ship via UPS or FedEx to consumers in Kentucky. We have that right already in Washington, so you can go to our webpage if you're a Washington resident, order, and we can deliver or we can ship to your house. That I think is going to become more permanent. I think you're going to see more states move that direction. That's a good thing. The next thing really has to be cross-state lines shipping, just like wine, just like wineries, the 44 states where you can ship wine. You should get registered with the state as a distillery. You should collect the tax that is due in that state, and you should remit the tax however the taxes are due, and you should become a partner with the state. This idea, this fallacy that it's okay to ship wine but not a bottle of bourbon across state lines is ludicrous. Alcohol is alcohol. As long as you check the ID, sign for it, you're properly registered, you are the producer of it, you know the quality of it, you've got the obligations for production, and you collect the tax and pay the tax. What's the issue? What's the issue? So that is the next battleground you're going to see.
Yeah, no, I agree. And in fact, I'd like to bring you back on for a discussion. I'm working with a couple of other industry leaders and thought leaders to have that discussion. Maybe it'll be a webinar. I'm not sure what it'll look like on the Bevfluence channel. But I definitely want to have that discussion because it's been something I've had clients where I worked with them to with their bar clubs. They had bars and spirits clubs where they were shipping out, and they had long-standing relationships with FedEx or UPS. And I came in and I tried to understand what the laws and regulations are. So it's pretty it's pretty ridiculous how it all plays out. But again, it'll hopefully some good can come out of what's happening now in this country and around the world. I know no one woke up on January 1st and said, thought it was going to be the dumpster fire that it has become. But I do think there are some silver linings to what's happening. I think there's going to be sweeping changes for our industry. I do think there's also going to be a lot of pain. And I want to talk a little bit about what's coming down next for you specifically.
Yeah.
Okay, so knowing, what we know about what's happening in the hospitality industry today, hotels are closing, restaurants are closing, bars are closing. A lot of them aren't going to be able to reopen after this, and a lot of them are just going to be permanently no more. So knowing that somewhere between 20% to possibly up to 50%, unfortunately, in some areas of potential accounts, what's your plan for your brand, and how do you get, how do you go back to where you were as far as sales, and how do distilleries around the country figure that out?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. We are somewhat unique. So we have 6 tasting rooms. We're going to have 2 more tasting rooms open by the end of the year, plus our partnership with the Tribe, with the new large distillery they have in their property, and that is a full, big, beautiful tasting room and bar and restaurant. So we have the ability to generate revenue, significant revenue at high margin in our tasting rooms. We can engage the customer. We can show the customer we're doing it responsibly with sanitation and with social distancing and everything else. And we can continue then to engage the customer on the education of the brand and the use of the spirits. For distilleries that have a single tasting room, which most of them do, and their distillery is off the beaten path, or it's small, or they don't have resources to run 5 days a week, much less 6 or 7 days a week, it's a real challenge. Everyone's situation is going to be unique. For us on the national sales side, until we see that there is a willingness on the part of the vast on-premise accounts to begin to purchase some craft spirits again, it's difficult to justify a sales team in certain areas. We have to work with our distributors to really plan that, because the distributors underwent a significant layoff of their own on-premise sales team, and some are going to start just now bringing them back, and some will be delayed, and they may not ever get back to 100% of where they were just a month ago or 2 months ago before the part of the layoffs. I do think there's going to be an opportunity in the middle to long term for people who are entrepreneurial, who on the bar and restaurant side specifically, one of the challenges in the last 10 years, this economic boom we've had, real estate has gotten very expensive. And so the rents that they have been paying, bars and restaurants, become exorbitant. And you have to have a high throughput, lots of bodies, lots of ticket sales to justify the rent. At the same time, you had a critical labor shortage, and that labor shortage meant fewer bodies applying for jobs with higher wages, and the mix just created a lot of upward pressure. The last report I saw, commercial real estate in Seattle, is that they think commercial rents could drop by 14 to 20% coming up. So if you are in the bar and restaurant business, and you say, I'm going to keep my powder dry for a year, and then I'm going to go on the hunt looking for the next bar restaurant space, there's going to be lots of spaces open, and the rent will be a lot lower than it is right now. And there'll be a lot of people looking for work. And so the economics of it a year from now, if you plan, will be much better than what they were 3 months ago. If you had high rent, high labor costs, and your fixed costs were high. Now, that doesn't help people who are stuck in the situation right now. But as you ask the question, how do you plan moving forward? If I were in the bar and restaurant space, that's how I'd plan. Plus, I would plan kind of an experience inside that allowed me to be flexible on seating configuration, so that as this thing, COVID or something down the road, expands and contracts, you can be fluid inside. You're not fixed in the literal layout of your seating. I do think the biggest opportunities for folks in the craft space is going to be working with the legislators to allow deliveries from their tasting rooms to the home, allowing shipping from their tasting rooms to the home, and allowing cross-state shipping. It's how you get your brand in front of people the quickest. It's not the cheapest way to do it. You have a brand called Brand X, and we're here in Washington, and someone in Arizona wants to buy a bottle. Well, there's going to be a shipping fee associated with that. And that shipping fee is going to add 10 to 15 to $20 in that bottle or two bottles. So already out the door, it's $20 more than if they had gone to the local store to buy it. The problem is with all these craft brands, you can't get the distributor approval to get in the network, and you can't get the retailers to put you on the shelf unless you can demonstrate you've got numbers to justify the investment of that. So as I try and tell our distributor partners all the time is, you should want these smaller distilleries to be shipping to as many customers as possible so that they build demand within that population center. And pretty soon the consumer doesn't want to pay that 20 bucks for shipping. They're going to go to the store, and they're going to go to the store so many times and say, if you had this bottle here on the shelf, I would buy it from you. Or at the restaurant, if you had this, I would come order that drink. And with that kind of critical mass, the distributors then say, okay, now it makes sense for me to bring this in. And I'm going to bring it in, I'm going to sell it. And then the consumer, once it's at that local store, they're not going to buy it from you on your webpage anymore because they don't want to pay the 20 bucks for shipping, and they don't want to wait. And that is the natural evolution of what should happen. And so with that in mind, it should be done in partnership with the distributors to realize they cannot be everything to everybody. They cannot possibly collect all the SKUs. They can't service all the SKUs, and the retailers they don't have shelf space for all the SKUs and the dollars to put all those products on there. They want to look for those things that are naturally going to rise to the top because of consumer demand. Everything else is just kind of a waste of time for them, but it is critically important for the distilleries. And I think that's where the real focus needs to be in the next 6 months. At the legislative level, delivery, shipping, cross-state delivery.
Well, I know we're all very busy, and I know you've got to run. So I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Definitely look below for those of you watching to check out Heritage. And if you live in the Washington State area, you can definitely buy online. They have a lot of really cool SKUs, a lot of really cool stuff that they do. I definitely recommend the brown sugar bourbon line. Very well put together. So,
thank you,
Justin, as always.
Great to see you. Great talking to you again. Stay safe where you are, and keep drinking it because we'll keep making it.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks.